Continuing with our top story tonight, Hunter Biden pleading to 3 counts with the Justice Department. Looks like he's not going to see any jail time. And yes, we've talked about the legal aspects and the political aspects, but there's kind of a civilizational aspect to a story like this, especially at a time when we see Donald Trump being charged with obstruction of justice for moving a box of files from one room to another, and Hillary Clinton took a hammer to her hard drive. There's a fairness problem here, and I think most Americans are starting to feel it. Let's bring in our favorite cultural critic, Andrew Klavan. He, of course, the host of The Andrew Klavan Show and the author of the great Cameron Winter series of thrillers, where the next book's coming out in November. Is that right, Andrew?
Yep, last day of October, coming out in Halloween.
Oh, perfect. Can't wait. Yeah. And I know, listen, it's not like conservatives to scream, that's not fair, right? I mean, we all, life's not fair. Who told you life was fair? But there are some things in our society that do need to be fair, aren't there?
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, when conservatives say life is not fair, they mean that literally. Life is not fair. People get sick and die. People die young. People die old. You know, it's like things happen to us that just don't work out. And there are also parts of human nature that aren't fair and that we can't do anything about. But of course, we can try to be fair. That is the whole point of being a human being, is to humanize the world. And one of the ways we are fair is by treating everybody equally under the law. The left has really come up with a new theory about this. Aside from their corruption, which is also quite deep, they also have a theory that people should be treated according to how much power they have in a sort of fake fantasy intersectional chart that has been made up in academia. So if you are a black person, you've been treated unfairly as a group, and therefore you can commit crimes and get off easy. Whereas if you're a white cop who shoots somebody in self-defense, you're guilty per se. You're guilty before you even face trial.
Yeah.
But what's happening at this top level, where Donald Trump, maybe fairly, is being charged for something that Hillary Clinton did almost the same thing and was not only not charged. You have to remember that James Comey said the reason he wasn't charging her was because he couldn't prove intent. This was after, as you say, she bleached and hammered her phones to destroy the evidence. I thought intent was written all over this. Whereas Donald Trump, when you read the indictment, they can't even name what his motive is, because the guy is so chaotic and scattershot in his thinking that we don't even know what he was thinking when he withheld these documents and whether the documents should have been withheld or not. So it's very complicated. It's just not right that he should be charged when she wasn't, especially when he's in position to run. And now with this Hunter Biden thing, I mean, this is the kind of thing that you see in advanced states of corruption. When you have like a Boss Tweed, New York, or 1980s New York, or places like Chicago, New Orleans, the Illinois state government, it gets so corrupt that there a kind of boldness and almost a sense of humor about their corruption comes out, where they're almost laughing at you, saying, what are you going to do? How are you going to stop us? And of course, with the Department of Justice, it's a damn good question. How are we? Who is going to charge the Department of Justice with a crime? Nobody, basically. Yeah. And to charge Hunter Biden, to say, well, he didn't pay the right taxes on the $1.5 million he made for 2 years. First of all, that leaves out the $5 million in bribes he was channeling to his father. Right. And took by himself. So somehow that got washed aside. The stuff that has reached the press, the legitimate stuff from his laptop that has reached the press, is enough to make you feel that something very, very terrible has happened at the top levels of our government through the auspices of Joe Biden and his family. And that they could investigate this. I think it's 5 years they've been investigating this, and come out with, tax evasion and a gun charge where he gets no jail time. I'm surprised they left off the littering charges and the bad parking charges, and maybe an overdue library book that he may have forgot to return. This is the kind of corruption that is late level corruption. It's usually just before the fall that this sort of pride and outspoken and humorous corruption occurs.
Such a smart observation. I'm so glad you're here tonight, because there is an audaciousness to this. It's so brazen. It's such a thumb in the eye. Like last week, where, credible charges that Joe Biden may have taken $5 million as a bribe from a foreign country, and his response was, where's the money? Well, we know they've got 20 shell corporations, right? I mean, that's the shell game with shell corporations. Find the money and maybe you got me. It angers people, Andrew. 55% of Americans right now, before Donald Trump's even made his case, 55% think these charges are politically motivated. That will have a deteriorating effect in this country if it hasn't already.
And in the meantime, we seem to be barreling toward an election between these two superannuated men. I mean, it's really time for us to stop being governed by 70 and 80-year-olds just right there.
Yeah.
And people are so angry that they're not thinking straight. That, it's like being in Weimar. It's like being in Weimar, Germany before the collapse. Just because the communists are bad doesn't mean the Nazis are good. Just because the Nazis are bad doesn't mean the communists are good. Both sides can be bad. And what we have right now is a deeply, deeply corrupt, venal, nasty little man. I've always detested Joe Biden. I think he's a nasty little guy and a corrupt little guy.
Agreed.
Fronting for a leftist philosophy that has been destructive everywhere it's gone, from the Soviet Union to San Francisco today. And on the other hand, we have Donald Trump, who has a lot of good ideas, really, because he just speaks with common sense. He's like the guy at the end of the bar, but he's not really fit to represent the ideas he puts forward.
Yeah.
His behavior is just awful in many ways. And I've been saying this for years, that it is a problem. People keep saying, well, no, he has to talk that way. Well, no, he doesn't. Bret Baier really called him out the other night in a absolutely stunning performance. Baier is the best journalist on television, no question about that. And he asked him the question that's been on my mind, which is, why are all these guys so terrible when you hired them?
Yeah, that was the most effective moment of that interview.
Yes, because this is the on one side, you have people who are driven nuts by Donald Trump in that they forget all their principles in order to hate him. So you get the David French people who's changed every principle he ever held just so he can hate on Donald Trump. And then on the other side, you have people who are willing to forgive Trump anything. Nothing is ever his fault. So soon we'll hear that Bret Baier is no good. He must be corrupt because Fox is turning and going down the drain. Whoever criticizes him becomes the corrupt person. But in this case, you have to ask yourself, if they're all corrupt, if they're all nasty, if they're all bad, what does it say about the guy who hired them? And this is the big problem with Trump, is that even though he did a lot of good things while he was in the office of the presidency, he was not really very competent. He didn't really get a lot of laws passed. He didn't wrangle Congress into doing what it was supposed to do. He never built the wall. That was his whole campaign, build the wall, and the wall has not been built. And so you have to ask yourself, even though it's a wonderful thing that Trump has awakened the Republican Party to the kind of principles they need to be fighting for, is he the man who can get those principles done?
Yeah.
And we're all so angry, we're really not thinking straight and figuring this out.
It sounds like you want Mercutio to run. A little pox on both their houses action here.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel compelled to quote Shakespeare when I've got Andrew Klavan on.
Of course.
Andrew, we've only got about a minute left here, but there are some people, I've talked to them, who were not leaning toward Trump. They were actually like, yeah, I'm done with this show. We've got other candidates that can get it done. But now, because of the Durham report and because of these new charges, they feel compelled to support Trump out of loyalty. Like it would be abandoning him at this point. I think they have a point. And also, if you look at what has been done to Trump, I'm not excusing the way he reacts, but at least it explains the way he has acted. I don't know how I would act if I were put upon the way he has been.
Absolutely right. I have total sympathy. He's been treated as unfairly as any public person has ever been treated in this country. I've never seen anything like it. I don't blame him for behaving the way he does. It just doesn't make him the right man for the job. You have to keep what the Greeks would call your telos, your purpose, in front of you. My purpose is to keep America free. My purpose is to keep the government limited by the Constitution and those enumerated rights and powers that the government has and all the powers that it doesn't have. That is the thing that has been overstepped. That's the border that's been crossed, and that's the border that I want to push the government back behind. If Trump's the best man for the job, I don't believe he is anymore. I think he's too wrapped up in his ego. I think he's too damaged by the way he's been treated. I think he's too damaged inside. But if he's the right person for the job, I'd vote for him. If he's the best man running, I'd vote for him. But still, I think we can do better. And I think that there are people who are more efficient, who still have the principles that we support, who could take that office and do it better, who are professional politicians, which I think is an important thing, and also are young enough to be efficient and energetic.
I will say this about professional politicians or people who have held elective office for 10, 15 years. They have a core of people who are loyal to them. And that was a big problem, I think, in the Trump presidency, too, as you saw with the revolving door there at the White House. Andrew Klavan Show, and again, the series, the Cameron Winter series, you see Strange Habit of Mind there over his shoulder. It's a terrific book. The first one, When Christmas Comes. If you're looking for some thrillers to read this summer on vacation, grab them now. More to come on O'Connor Tonight.